So, you finally landed the FP&A role you've been working toward. You're excited, you're ready to go, and then a few weeks in, the reality of the job sets in. Because nobody tells you what working in FP&A is actually like. You typically just find out on the job. I've spent over 15 years in FP&A leadership roles at Procter & Gamble, Unilever, and Squarespace, and I've watched a lot of sharp finance people walk into this role without a clear picture of what they signed up for. So I want to give you an honest look at the brutal parts of working in FP&A and the parts that make it worth doing anyway. Quick heads up before we start, I also run a free live training where I teach the FP&A playbook behind all of this, called Steal My FP&A Playbook. The link is first in the description if you want it. For now, let's get into the video. The first frustration. Your best work goes unnoticed and small mistakes get all the attention. What I mean is, you can deliver 50 clean reports and hear nothing from leadership, but miss one cell reference or get a single number wrong on a board deck and your inbox lights up within the hour. In finance, accuracy is simply the baseline expectation. Getting it right rarely earns a comment. So you can spend weeks getting hundreds of numbers exactly right, and the reward for that is silence. And then one small thing slips and your VP is emailing you by 9 a.m., your manager is messing you about it, and you're explaining yourself to people who never said a word about the months of work that came before. That stings. It's easy to start feeling like the good work doesn't count, and the only time anyone notices you is when something breaks. The second frustration is unrealistic deadlines. Sales gets a full quarter to hit their number. Marketing plans a campaign over several months. Operations usually has plenty of runway to make a change. Then there's the board deck finance owns, and we get 48 hours for it, sometimes less. And here's the classic FP&A nightmare. The board meeting is a week out. You send the deck early, right on schedule, and now the change requests start landing one after another all the way up to the final deadline. You see, nobody's doing this to make your life harder. It comes down to the timing between month and close and when leadership wants to see the numbers, and that squeeze lands on finance. The third frustration is being the person who has to say no. When a VP of sales wants more headcount, sometimes you're the one telling them the budget won't support it. When marketing wants to double campaign spend, you're the one pointing out the ROI doesn't justify it. Do that enough and you become the name nobody wants to see on the calendar. If you take it personally, it wears on you. If this is already sounding discouraging, stay with me. I'll get into how to navigate all of it and why FP&A can be a genuinely fulfilling career. There are two more hard truths to cover first. The next one is the conflict you'll have with other departments. The VP of sales might want to ship more units while you're pushing for better margins. Marketing might want to load up on ads and big campaigns while you're asking for clear ROI on every dollar. This conflict is literally how the role is designed, because finance exists to bring discipline to the rest of the business, so some friction comes with the territory. The risk is that if you're not deliberate about how you handle it, the job can start to feel like a standing argument with everyone. The last frustration is that earning a real say in big decisions can take years. A lot of companies, finance is seen as the team that runs the reports and tracks the numbers, not the people who should weigh in on how the business is run. So you end up proving yourself again and again before your opinion carries weight when the bigger calls come up. Now, with all of that on the table, the rewards in this role are real. The first reward is the bird's eye view of the business. You get to be involved in things that nobody else sees. You see the strategy leadership is pushing, how each team is actually executing on it, and where the numbers land as a result. It all comes across your desk. Marketing thinks in campaigns, sales lives in the pipeline, and operations is focused on efficiency. You're the one tying all of it back to the P&L. You're the only one who has that bird's eye view. No other role gets that vantage point. And being the connector across the business is what turns FP&A leaders into some of the most valuable people in the company over time. The second reward is that you get to do two very different kinds of work in the same day. 1 hour, you're deep in a financial model. The next, you're sitting with a VP, helping them think through a hire or a pricing change. That variety keeps it interesting. C-suite access also starts earlier here than in most functions. Even as a junior analyst, you're often in the room presenting to the people who run the company. That exposure compounds because the relationships and visibility you build early shape the promotions that come later. The third reward is that process improvement actually moves the needle here. In a lot of jobs, you do the work the way it's always been done and leave it there. In FP&A, the gap between a 3-month budget cycle and a 3-week one often comes down to working smarter. When you're the one who figures that out, you free up your whole team to focus on the work that drives the business forward. Leadership notices too, because when finance moves faster, the company moves faster. The fourth reward is finding the thing that saves the company real money and then watching leadership act on it. Few things in business feel as good as catching something nobody else saw and seeing it turn into value. Maybe a supplier raised prices without telling anyone, and that's why margins slipped on every sale. Maybe customer acquisition cost crept up for a reason that has nothing to do with what sales has been reporting. Or you find $2 million sitting in a vague miscellaneous line that no one has looked at in a year. You bring it forward, leadership runs with it, and the company is better off because of your analysis. That kind of impact is rare in most jobs. In FP&A, it's part of the work. So rewarding. One more point, and it carries more weight every year. FP&A holds up against AI better than a lot of finance roles, including parts of accounting and audit. The repeatable, rules-based work is exactly what AI is good at, and it will keep taking more of that over time. But the heart of FP&A is challenging the assumptions behind a forecast, getting a skeptical VP to act on what you found, and making the call when two options both look reasonable on paper. That's the part AI struggles to replace, and it's where the real career gets built. Before I get into how to actually thrive in FP&A, here's the fastest way to build these skills. I run a free live session called Steal My FP&A Playbook. In 90 minutes, I walk through the complete 6-part system I use across budgeting, analysis, forecasting, modeling, business partnering, and storytelling, and how they fit together as one process rather than 6 separate skills. There's no replay, so you have to be there live. The registration link is first in the description. Save your seat and let's keep going. Now, here's what I've learned after 15 years of doing this. The frustrations I covered don't disappear as you get more senior. Deadlines stay tight, you still have to say no, and the friction with other teams doesn't go away. What changes is your ability to handle them, and that comes down to building the right skill set. It starts with people skills. People skills matter just as much or even more than technical skills. Excel alone won't carry you past a junior analyst role. You have to be able to take the numbers and tell leadership what they mean and what to do about them. Most finance pros overinvest in the technical side because that's what got them hired in the first place. But once you're managing a team, you're not the one building the models anymore. Your team is. Your job becomes taking their work and getting leadership to act on it. If you can't do that, you'll hit a ceiling no matter how strong your modeling is. And by the way, soon you don't even need to have to lead a team anymore to get there. You might be overseeing a team of AI agents, and it will have the same effect. You're the one who sells the output of the model and influences decision making, not the one putting it together. In fact, this was the hardest lesson I had to learn, and I learned it the hard way. Early in my career at P&G, I was proud of my Excel work. The models were accurate and the forecasts held up. So when I asked for an international transfer to the US, so I could live in my wife's home country with her, I figured it was a sure thing. Then my director of finance pulled me aside. He told me my rating just wasn't where it needed to be because the people I worked with in other departments didn't see me as a trusted advisor. To them, I was just the Excel guy. That was the day it clicked. However good your technical work is, if you can't get other people to act on it, you'll hit a ceiling in this career. Now, The second skill is learning to deliver insights rather than just data. Data tells people what happened, and insight tells them what to do about it. If you tell a leader sales declined 15% in quarter 3, that's data and they'll file it away. If you tell them sales declined 15% because the top 3 enterprise clients froze their budgets, and you walk in with a 90-day recovery plan and 3 specific actions, that's an insight. Now they have something to act on. Most early career FP&A pros don't see this until they've handed over months of solid analysis and watched leadership do nothing with it. It clicked for me when I started spending more time on what leadership should do with the numbers than on the analysis itself. Once I showed up to meetings with a clear point of view on the next move, not just the numbers, the whole dynamic changed. I went from the analyst presenting data to becoming part of the conversation about what to do next. That's when my career started to take off. The third skill is to think like a lawyer instead of a police officer. A police officer enforces the rules. A lawyer helps people get what they want within the rules. Walk into every conversation with sales or marketing as the budget police, and you'll damage the relationships you need to do the job well. So when marketing wants to double their spend, instead of flatly saying no, help them find the lower performing campaigns they could cut to free up that budget themselves. That's how you stop being the person who always says no and start being the person people want in the room, because you help them make their ideas work. Business partnering is the skill that got me promoted 3 times in 5 years at Unilever. I made it my mission to be the FP&A person my partners consulted before making major decisions. Within a year, I was getting pulled into conversations I'd never have been invited to before. That's how trust compounds in this role. So, is FP&A worth it? After 15 years, my honest answer is yes. The downsides I covered are real, but they're survivable. The upsides are much harder to find anywhere else. You get the bird's eye view of the whole business, real conversations with executives, and a level of impact that most roles never offer. Those add up over an entire career. If you want to go deeper on everything we covered today, that's exactly what I teach in my free live session, Steal My FP&A Playbook. It runs 90 minutes, it's live, and there's no replay, so you have to show up for it. The registration link is first in the description. Save your spot, and I'll see you there.